Remote viewer Dick Allgire worked this as a blind target. He was given only the target ID D8 I7-C2V3. He was told nothing about the target. Dick Allgire produced an amazing 41 pages of data over 3 sessions. His work is a tour de force in remote viewing. We examined his data and did collateral research to see how much of his work could be verified by the historical record. He initially gets on to the target by perceiving the roads of this era in history. He hears wagon wheels rather than modern tires. He senses animals, hooves, hay, dung. Allgire describes the roads as packed stone, like old Roman roads. Many of the roads in France are, in fact, old Roman roads, and Napoleon is famous for his epic final journey on a Roman road.
When I initially got onto this target, it was the roads that made me realize that this was an old target. The roads and the smell of the animals. When you're in the present time and when you're in modern day, there's concrete, there's asphalt, there's the smell of gasoline and car exhaust and plastics and metal. And this target, when I got there, was dirt roads. Some roads were nicer, but they were stone, like I said, Roman roads. And then there was the smell of the animals, because transportation back in those days was done by animals, carriages, horseback, oxen. So I smelled the animals and I knew the roads were old.
Allgire saw a death mask. He didn't recognize the person, but realized some part of the target involved a famous man whose likeness was captured in a plaster and then bronze death mask. What he drew closely resembles the death mask of Napoleon. Allgire saw a red wax seal, of the kind used by notable, powerful individuals in history to seal and verify documents. Allgire says these are orders, decrees. He says a decree is sealed and sent. This is high authority. This is one of Napoleon's seals, which matches the image produced in Allgire's remote viewing session. Allgire found himself next to a big, imposing wall constructed of old stone blocks. He says this involved the target person. Allgire said this person may have actually been imprisoned for a time, and that this walled place may be considered a monument that he is remembered by. Napoleon was, in fact, imprisoned, and he is associated with the Bastille. Allgire said the target individual probably spoke Latin, that he was fierce, passionate, acerbic. Allgire reports this person doesn't tolerate fools, can be harsh and seem heartless, with criticism of people he feels are fools. History tells us Napoleon was a mediocre Latin student, and he did use Latin phrases during his reign. Allgire says the person he was remote viewing either had slaves or had some association with slavery. This is true. Napoleon reinstated slavery. Allgire perceived that there were monuments to this person. He reports there was a monument that was taken down. Then it was put up again, like he went out of favor, was erased from memory, then brought back. There are many monuments to Napoleon. Allgire said one of them is on a hill. This is that monument. Allgire saw a man on a horse. He said he jumps a horse. He rides. He's fearless and rides with abandon. Fast. One of the most famous images of Napoleon is of him on horseback. He was renowned a horseman.
The horse was one of the better visuals I had in this target, because I saw this guy jumping his horse, and I thought I saw foxes, like it looked like a fox hunt. So I said, wow, that's a guy on a horse. And then I looked again, and that time I saw him with a sword and striking men down. So I knew he was a horseman. I saw the horse. I saw him on his horse very clearly. Didn't recognize him, but I knew he was on a horse.
Algar saw him in an elaborate and colorful uniform with golden epaulets, decorations, someone who leads men and is confident. This, of course, is a perfect image of the Emperor Napoleon. He slays men in battle, a warrior. He has killed men. And then Allgire saw a colorful banner. He said, "This flutters in the wind. It calls men to battle. It evokes honor and nation." This historical painting depicts exactly what Allgire was describing. Allgire said the man he saw commanded armies. He saw men in uniform, in formation. Allgire said the man was concerned with encampments, strategy, cook tents, logistics, wagons and supplies. He saw lots of cannons. And, as he begins to assert amazing target contact, without realizing it consciously, he states this seems the time of the Napoleonic Wars. An amazing description of Napoleon and his times. Allgire says he finds beauty in cannons, the pattern of shot, blowing holes in lines of advancing soldiers. It is death, misery, ripped flesh, but to him, it is beautiful, like blossoms. Allgire says the target individual has a perverse pet name for this. Allgire draws the battle with cannons blowing, blossoming holes in the advancing soldiers. The French terms cannonade, defilade, and enfilade pop into his head. According to historical records, Napoleon called his cannons belles filles, his beautiful daughters. Algar saw him moving pieces on a game board or map. He says, "I get the idea of a board game. It is not chess, like a precursor to chess, a strategy game with pieces. This is an old game." Napoleon's strategic moves in battle are studied to this day like a board game. Algar saw this man addressing other men. Note the man he drew is short and standing on a riser. Algar reports he feels superior. He knows they plot against him, but he feels he is able to fend off insurgents. He says this may be a mistake. I get the idea of a legislative body like a Senate. They have hard feelings toward him, but in an inferior position. They are bitter, but must acquiesce. All of this remote viewing data is corroborated by history. Algar saw him in a place with an ornate and grand chandelier. Napoleon's apartment did have such a chandelier. Algar's session went deep into the life and times of Napoleon. The tasking was designed to look at whether a chip implant was actually discovered in a later forensic autopsy of Napoleon's skull. In his session, Algar draws the skull and writes, "I want to say chip, but this may be a legend." He thought he was in control, but he was a game piece. Thought he was chess master, but he was a piece on the game. This is barely legible because Algar was in an altered state during the remote viewing session. Algar has an experience he calls the bright light event.
There's a bright light. He's escorted to a bright energy, like a portal. He's pulled into a dimensional shift. There's fright at first. He's transported to a place where he gets a data download, an upgrade. Something is done to him. Now, he doesn't handle this with humility. It gives him a sense of superiority, a Napoleonic complex. He feels he's above the common people. It gives him power, but in a sense, it corrupts him because he abuses it. He uses it for power and dominion. He overcompensates. He has power without humility or compassion. And those who gave him the power enjoyed his failures. They felt he was ungrateful.
Allgire saw him writing at a desk in a room full of things, mementos. Allgire said, "He writes a diary or a memoir. This is historically significant. This is entrusted to someone." All true. Amazing remote viewing data, completely on target. Throughout the session, even though Allgire said Napoleonic Wars and Napoleon Complex, he was unsure if this was Napoleon. Allgire says he admired the Roman Empire. He wanted to be a Roman emperor. He wanted to conquer.
Throughout the session, I had this nagging feeling of Rome, like the road seemed Roman, and then the guy that I was viewing, I kept getting the feeling that he wanted to be a Roman emperor. Like, he spoke a little Latin, but not great, but he used Latin terms. And I thought, is this like Caesar? He had a death mask? And that's too much conscious mind, but it's, as you work the target, stuff like that nags at you. It was the moment that I realized he hated the Cossacks, and he swore at them. A French word popped into my mind, bâtard, like these bastard Cossacks. He hated the Cossacks because the Cossacks attacked his flanks, and he wanted to kill all the Cossacks. And so I knew that didn't jibe with the Roman time period, like were there Cossacks in Rome? Why is this guy mad at Cossacks? And then his cannon, he loved his cannon. He really was into cannon. So had the feeling all the way through the second half of the session, like this guy is an emperor or wants to be an emperor. He used perfume, but he often smelled of his horse. He wore colorful gold trim, a tailor-made uniform. He spoke Latin and French. Women were important in his life. He had wives and lovers and daughters. He felt he was the chess master when he commanded men in battle. It was a chess game, and he controlled the board. He moved the pawns and the knights, and he took the castles. But in the end, he realized that he was only a chess piece in a bigger game. He realized there are levels above, and he was just a piece in a much larger game.
One of the best remote viewing sessions ever documented under double-blind protocol. Dick Allgire's remote viewing of Napoleon, May 2023.